Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. You guys know who it is. This is Tony Lynch, and I am the host of this podcast. And yes, we are your number one podcast for bringing you stories around death, down, and grief, and all the messiness that comes in between. With some amazing people out here doing some amazing things, changing people's lives, one heartbeat at a time. Now, before I bring on my next guest, I would like to say that if this is your first time tuning in, do me a favor, head on over to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. But most importantly, if you know anyone who could benefit from the conversations that we have, do me a favor, share this with them. And before I bring on my next guest, I would like to say that this is for educational purposes only. Now, without further ado, guys, help me welcome my next guest, Jen Allen, to the show. Jen, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Let me hold on. Give me a second. I think my headset is kind of wanting to mess up on me a little bit. So let me do this real quick. And I think there it is. Let me. All right. All right. Hold on. Give me a second. Let me switch up real quick. Okay.
Okay.
There we go. All right. Can you hear me better now?
That's perfect.
Awesome. My headset was kind of messing up on me. So how you doing today, Jen?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for joining me today. Welcome to the show.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes. Now, before we get started, introduce yourself to the audience. Tell people who you are, where you're from, and about the work that you do.
Yeah, my name is Jen. I am a nurse practitioner. I have been working as a nurse for, oh gosh, every time I answer this question, I remember how old I am, and it makes me a little sad. I've been,
No
I've
need to
been
be sad.
for over 15 years now. I am the wife of a Air Force veteran, so we've lived all over the country and even other parts of the world. I have two beautiful children, and one of them left us in 2023, which is why I am sitting here with you today.
Wow. Well, first and foremost, I want to say that my heart is with you and everything. And thank you for the work that you do. Now, being a nurse practitioner, when did you first get into that work?
I my nurse practitioner career is a weird one. I was an ER nurse for a really long time. I started in 2010 and actually graduated to be a nurse practitioner in August of 2023, just a month before my son passed away. And so I actually haven't been practicing. I actually run a mental health practice instead.
Okay. And how do you feel about mental health these days?
Well, my son left us due to suicide. And so mental health is a huge part of my family and a huge part of the work I do. My husband and I own a mental health practice. My mother-in-law is a therapist. My daughter's a therapist. Um, it runs pretty deep in our family. And after we lost Daniel, I decided that mental health was going to be my mission for not only myself, but for everyone, because I believe everyone should have access to the help that they need.
Yeah. Now that leads me to ask the next question because I think people don't understand when an individual is mentally unhealthy, you know, they tend to act very irrational, right? Make decisions, permanent decisions. And people oftentimes are left with questions of why, why, or what if, right? The what ifs and things like that. How do you approach um, situations in that manner?
In regards to my son, gosh, his suicide was very unexpected. Um, so you're not wrong. Those questions came up quite a lot for everyone in our family. And the hardest thing to come to terms with is that we will never know the answers to any of those questions. We will never know what he was thinking. We will never know why he did what he did. We will never know why he didn't call one of us or talk to any one of us instead of making that choice. And so learning to let go of those questions and understanding that we're never going to get answers to them has been pretty freeing and has helped me, at least. I don't want to speak for everybody in my family, but has helped me a lot in moving forward with my grief.
Now, I would like to ask, how did that affect you and your family? And then how did it affect your husband? Because men, we process things just a little bit differently, and sometimes we do have a hard time expressing those emotions, things like that. So how did it affect you and your family?
Yeah, I always describe my life now um, as having been split into two. So I have a life that I had before I lost my son, and I have the life that I have after. Um, it the loss of a child, the only way I could describe it is like trying to live with a piece of your heart actually missing. Um, and so learning how to live again, learning how to breathe again becomes, well, at least it became my focus. Um, and our family is broken. It's different. It's going to be changed for forever. And we're learning slowly how to um, find joy in the bittersweetness of life. Um, and to answer your question about my husband, he did what amazing men do in that situation. He took care of our family, continued to work so that we could eat and put a roof over our heads when I couldn't. Um, and then slowly, began to take care of himself as I was able to take care of myself a little bit more.
I find that amazing, right? Because when I sit down and I talk with couples, and I want to say thank you guys for staying together. You guys have done amazing to work through that because a lot of couples don't make it, right? There's a lot of blame and finger pointing. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of things that go along with that. And I don't think there's anybody else's fault. I just think the grief can be so heavy, that people are looking for someone to blame. And in a lot of instances, just like what you said right there, and I'm glad that you said it, the men will go and do things like take care of the home, right? And things like that until the woman is at a place. And a lot of times I think this is where that disconnect happens. The man is assuming that when the women get to a certain place that they can kind of switch over and then begin the grieving process themselves. And what I found that a lot of times, and I want to get your thoughts on this, what I found that a lot of times that in situations like that, when the woman is feeling a little bit better, right, when she has that support system and at a place where she's beginning to heal a little bit more, they oftentimes forget about the man, right? They oftentimes look at the man and go, "What do you want?" Right? Like you should have been taking care of yourself while I was taking care of myself, type thing. And they kind of forget that that role, right? The responsibility, the heaviness of it. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah. What are your thoughts on
I think sometimes that does happen. Um, and not just in that close knit relationship and in that couple, but society, right? Like men are supposed to be tough and emotionless and not be sad. Um, and so we expect them to get over it and to take care of business, so to speak, and to take care of the family. Um, and then there's the the other side where like they're just forgotten about altogether. And we forget that men grieve and that they have feelings, and that we're in this together, and that you know and we grieve differently. And I think that's another thing that a lot of folks forget. Like, there have been times when I have gotten frustrated with my husband because I didn't think he was sad enough. And it wasn't that he wasn't sad enough. He just doesn't do it the way I do it. And so part of what has worked for us is talking about our grief together and learning how he grieves differently than I do, and vice versa, and how we can meet in the middle and come together, and then also have separate time where, like, I like to write in my journal letters to Daniel. And I do that by myself. And my husband has things that he likes to do by himself to, honor his grieving process. So just communication is very important.
I like that because that is actually something that I encourage people to do. Like learn how to learn how to communicate, but also learn how to have times where you are alone or by yourself to be able to do the things that will make you feel better, right? But I think a lot of it too is having the grace and the patience for each other. You had mentioned something. You had gotten mad at him because he didn't do it the way that the way that you thought he was. He wasn't sad enough, but from your own thoughts, right? And you caught on to it. After a while, you said, "Well, he doesn't do it the way that I do it," and that's to be expected, right? Now, the word expectation comes into mind. What do you think the biggest challenges is between men and women in that are or struggling in relationships that have gone through something like that? Is it the expectation of what the next person assumes, um, how you're supposed to do it?
I think whenever we don't voice our needs, unmet expectations happen. Like, it just, you can't have a relationship, not communicate with each other, and get your needs, because we're not psychic and we can't just know. Um, even in our case, my husband and I have been married for 28 years, and we're still learning about each other. Um, and this, going through this process taught us more than I could have even imagined. And being able to communicate our needs with each other instead of expect things, um, I think has helped us a lot.
Mhm. I love that. I love that because as you was thinking about it, I started thinking about my own situation and things like that. And this is something that's hard for men to admit, right? There's a We don't know how to articulate what's going on with us majority of the time, right? So I can definitely see where that struggle comes in there. Now, over a period of time, I have learned how to articulate. I have become a lot more emotionally aware, um, but unfortunately, sometimes I will shut down if I know that the person that I'm talking to is not going to be receptive to what I say, and because in turn, in a lot of ways, I think we as human beings, we learn to protect ourselves from certain things, right? To go, no, I'm not going to put myself in that situation. And I think people teach us those things over time. Even people that if you're going through something, a person may say, I'm here for you, you can talk to me and all of these different things. And it only takes a couple times of you believing that individual till you finally go, no, I'm not going to do it this time. Right. And we choose to struggle in silence, right? Instead of seeking outside of that circle, right? We get so conditioned within that circle that we want to believe that everyone is like that, right? Which is a huge stigma. Now that I've learned over a period of time, which is a huge stigma. What are your thoughts on that?
That makes me think about a lot of the work that my husband does with the couples that he works with,
Mm,
and um, and the kind of work that we've done in our relationship over the past 28 years. And a lot of that all boils down to communication. And I know I said that before, but I think when people hear that, they think that communication is just speaking. Um, and a huge part of communication is also listening and absorbing and trying your best to do that judgment free.
mm,
So like when I was frustrated with my husband because he wasn't sad enough, um, I we talked about it, and he didn't get mad at me because I was saying he wasn't sad enough. He reflected back like, well, what I'm hearing you say is that you know I'm not as sad as you are. And he asked questions like, what are you seeing or what are you not seeing that's driving you in that direction? And I was able to tell him, I cry all the time, and he doesn't. He cries very rarely. And so just talking about the differences helped us both see um, the other side without being nasty and without being judgmental and without taking things personally, and just being open to the other person's experience is really beneficial.
mm. I love that, man. I love that you brought that up, because I think there's a lot of education that can go along with there. One thing I talk about with people in general is creating the atmosphere, right? Versus the environment. The environment can be a place that's very dysfunctional, and a person will reflect that through their emotions by hiding them, or overly expressing them, depending on the individual and their journey that they've been on. Healing takes time, right? And I don't think people. I think one of the challenges is that people are afraid to heal because healing hurts. And two, people don't know how to hold space and create an atmosphere for those conversations to happen. How do you approach that?
I uh, I kind of struggle in those situations with folks like that because I am really open, especially about like the loss of my son. Um, I feel like we should be able to talk about these things because it's like I was watching a podcast the other day, a Tony Robbins podcast, and he had um, a guest on that I really wish I could remember the name of. And he was talking about how 96% of us are going to experience trauma severe enough to lead us into PTSD.
Mm,
96%, that's huge.
that is huge.
And over 2 million people die in the United States each year, which means close to 2 million families are touched by grief each year. Yet we don't talk about it. We brush it under the rug, and um, we act like it doesn't exist. And sometimes, even when close people to us lose someone, we treat them like they have the plague and we avoid them.
Mm,
And
yes.
so, yeah. And so I want to bring this out more and to have everybody talking about it. I would love to create like a grief culture in our country so that we can heal together and not be pushed into a corner and expected to get over it.
Right. That is a huge thing right there. Yeah. And I felt that one deeply because I've been on the receiving end And before I've experienced the losses that I have, I was on the pushing end as well, right? Now I could say, I could come up with any excuses, but now understanding better, right? Because when you know better, you do better. I was just telling somebody this. I was like, look, knowledge is key, but wisdom is power, right? If you have the knowledge about it, you can develop the wisdom in order to develop and become a better version of yourself, even in situations like that. And after 6 years, almost 7 years of doing this work, the one thing that I have been learning, and I'm consistently a student of grief, is that you never judge anyone because of what they're experiencing or how they're acting, because you don't know their walk, right? And our job is not to judge them, but to walk with them and comfort them, no matter what it looks like, and no matter how long it takes. If this is someone that you care about, make the initiative, right? And it can be something as simple as a text message, right? Because people call me all the time, and if I'm not in the mood, I won't answer my phone. But the one thing that's going to be on my phone is a text message, right? And I may not, if you leave me a voicemail, I may not even listen to that voicemail. But I want to give you something visual to let you know that I am thinking about you. How can we teach others that something to do something similar like that when they have individuals in their life, but they may not know um, how to approach it or taking the steps of what to do?
That's a really good question, and I love when people ask it because I think there's a couple of parts to that. One, when people do ask questions on how to help their family or friends that are grieving, we should never shame them and make them feel like they should have known the answer.
Right.
Um, because it's a hard thing to show up for somebody that's in that much pain. And two, I think the more people we have out there doing the work that you're doing and the work that I'm trying to do, and other people like us educating um, and talking about this, I think more and more people will get it. And more people will know um, when their friend loses a child to not just say I'm sorry or not ignore them, or you know we want them to show up, like show up, go mow their lawn, bring them dinner, go do something for them because right now they can't think straight. So don't ask them what they need because they don't know what they need. like just go do something for them.
Yeah.
Get a group together and help take care of the house and just be there with them.
And we got a comment up here. First of all, my angel too. Um, their grief is only 7 years old. 2017, lost their son and his BFF due to gun violence. You know, my heart is with you. It's definitely with you, because now that is something that people don't talk about as well, because that carries its own different segment of grief, right? When you have to have that news and things like that. I mean, and this is not taken away from anyone, right? Any news about your loved one that have passed is going to be devastating to hear. Now we're in a place where there's a lot of people who have lost their children, and I want to say thank you guys for tuning in to that one as well. But and look, I'm gonna try to be respectful when I say this, because I don't want anybody to think that I'm taking away from their loss or their grief. But I've experienced every loss that you can ever imagine, except for spousal loss, and I've done everything I could to avoid it. Right? I cut people out of my life. I'm like, I don't. I have a hard time letting people in because of that. Right? My philosophy is that I don't want to hurt someone, because I know that one day I have to leave. And I don't want to leave someone with that sort of pain. And so I protect myself. And in turn, I try to protect other people from that, right? You know, um, and I know that's probably not the best way to do it, but this is the thought pattern that comes behind it. Do you think it's harder for people to find meaningful relationships when you've experienced the loss like that?
Absolutely. Um, not not just like real relationships, but even like surface level things happen for people. Um, one of the examples I like to use with this is like watching TV, for example. I have some shows that um, I know a lot of women are going to relate to this. Sometimes you just feel like crying or feel like being sad, and you put a sad movie in, and you know it's going to, give you what you need. Um, after I lost my son, I lost all of that. So there was no more empathy because somebody was going through a divorce. There was no more empathy or sympathy because somebody lost their grandparent, um, or because they lost their job. Like, I really struggled to have any of that for anyone that didn't go through exactly what I went through. Um, and it's taken me a while to slowly get that back. But also relationships, like, um, once you lose somebody that's close to you like that, it becomes very real, and you really you really understand that you can lose anyone at any time. And because it's happened, the chances of it happening again, you understand, are high. Like, we're all going to lose, we're not going to get through this life unscathed. So we're going to lose more people, and they're going to lose us. And so I can definitely see how um, people would want to put on the brakes and not want to build a relationship after going through something like this, because
Yeah.
that pain, you don't want to go through that pain again.
I can definitely relate to it. I can definitely, most definitely, say that I've been guilty of that, right? But every time I do get in the position of that, it gives me an opportunity to learn, to be better, to be more receptive of those things. I think the biggest challenge is that, can people accept um, what I've gone through, right? Can they truly accept it in the fashion of saying, I understand what you're feeling? Because now I say this to say that. Thank you, Tracy, for showing up. Suicide loss processes differently. It does. It really does. And so when, say for instance, as a male, um, having lost a child, it is really, really difficult for me to be around people at times with children, right? And I don't know if it's ever going to change, but there's a side of me that's very protective over their children, and and I'm constantly watching other people's children because I want to keep them safe, right?
Yeah.
But I only have a small window where I can do that, right? Before I begin to, my mind starts to wander off and start to think like, wow, I miss those days when I was able to do that as well, right? So I think a lot of times, and I could be wrong, a lot of times when we do experience these things, we become protective over other people's children's, because again, like you said, we don't want anybody to have to experience with the things that we've gone through, and I think it become both a curse and a blessing in the same sense, because although we do that for other children, we forget to have grace for ourselves because of fear.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. I um I had an experience. My husband and I to Disney World with some friends a few months ago, and we were walking over a bridge, and a little boy had lost sight of his parents. Um, and he started yelling for his mom, mommy, and was kind of screaming for him, and that sent me into a little bit of a spiral, for a couple of reasons. One, he was a little boy, and I lost my son, and he was calling for his mom, and that sent me immediately to that place where, like, was my son wishing I was there when he left? Was he needing me, and I wasn't there? Um, and then also I just go into mom mode, like, where's this kid's mom? Like,
Right.
why
Right.
isn't why isn't she watching him, and how do I help him? And then and then he found her. But I had to go collect myself after that experience. And um, yeah, there's been a lot of times when we've been out and about with friends at dinner or whatever, and we see little kids, especially um, moms and their sons. That's really, really, really hard.
Yeah. I'm gonna pop this up here. I want to get your thoughts on here. Let's dive deeper into this one right here because I think, and Tracy, she's a colleague and a friend, and this is part of the thing that she does as well. She too has lost a child to suicide, and if a person has never experienced something like that, this may be something. This can be an educational thing for them. So I'm gonna pose this to you. Suicide loss processes differently when you hear things like that or when you see something like that. What are your thoughts?
I I think they're right. Um, I think all loss is a little bit different, and one of the things to keep in mind with suicide, um, and why I think it's so different is, I'm going to use myself as an example. My son chose to leave this world. Um, Sometimes that makes me feel a little better because it was his choice. It wasn't a choice that somebody else made for him. And sometimes it makes me feel a little more awful because, again, those questions, why why didn't he come to us for help? Why didn't he reach out? They pop up a lot.
No, I want to ask this question because it's something that's always on my mind, and I have a lot of colleagues here as well that aligns to suicide prevention, Yarrow, and a few people that deal with teens that are struggling with their mental health and have been affected by losing friends through suicide, right? And how do we how do we catch it, or what are some of the signs that we can look for when we have friends, family, or children around us that are struggling like that and may be in a very vulnerable situation?
That's a really hard question. Um, because I think sometimes there are signs. In our case, like, we knew that our son was struggling with some things. He was 25. He met a girl that we did not love and approve of. He started drinking again, but there were no there were no signs that this was on the horizon for him. Give me 1 second, Tony. I
Yeah,
am so sorry.
no worries, no worries. Anybody in the comments, I pose that question to you as well. If you have experienced this sort of tragic loss, what are some of the signs that we as facilitators, as peers, can look out for, um, that we can, that would indicate that a person is planning on doing that. And I know a few of them, and I am QPR certified as well. And some of the things that I have experienced or have seen signs, people constantly giving away things, right? Um, People beginning to kind of distance themselves, a total change of personality. She went from happy to sad almost overnight. Okay, I love that. I love that. So that is something to take into consideration and put inside of my brain so I can have a better understanding of that as well. I know some people will begin to isolate themselves a lot, and now I'm going to speak from my own experience. I was asking the audience, what are some of the signs that we can look out for, when people are struggling in that fashion, to so we can be able to step in and give support, right? And the reason why I say that is because that's, if a person can notice the slightest changes, we can then turn in without pushing that person further, maybe begin to just show up a little bit more, right? Maybe, it's just, hey, you want to go for a walk, you know what I'm saying? Just to get outside of an environment, to go into a place where there's just you and that person, maybe no talking, like I love to go fishing, right? I do. I love to go fishing. And so a lot of times when I meet with men, I find those things like we don't meet at a bar. And if I can remove them from the home, and get them to go do something that they enjoy doing, then I will go do something like that, right? But some of the telltale signs that I've noticed, people starting to give it away. Now I did that too. When I attempted the last time, I gave away everything. I was already homeless, and I thought to myself, I convinced myself it was the best thing for me, and everyone else, and it was a reality for me. As dark as that may sound, I told myself that the world and people around me would be better off if I wasn't there, right? And I think a lot of it was shame. I know, me too, Trace. I wish it was more of an exact science. I want to put this comment up here. Tracy says she agrees with you, Jen. Some signs aren't readily noticeable, or they can be changes, but they don't look like something mirroring suicide reality, right? And I totally agree. Totally agree. So what do you think? Some of the most common signs that we can look out for, and maybe educate ourselves on some that are not so common.
Yeah. Knowing what I know now, I think I consider myself to have an insider's view of all of this now. Um, I would say that when someone really, really retreats, or they draw inwards and they stop doing things that they normally do, they don't want to talk to anybody anymore. Um, that's really worrisome. And I would definitely be bugging the hell out of them. Pardon my experience. I would be making sure that they knew that I love them and that this world is not better without them. Um, and then I know a lot of people start to kind of take care of business and start saying goodbyes, start apologizing. They often start making sure that their pets have homes and stuff like that. So
Right.
I would be really careful about stuff like that too.
Right. I've, you know, I since I've been doing this work, before I got into this work, I wish I would have had that knowledge, that understanding, because I lost a dear friend that way, and I didn't think nothing else of it, right? And I was probably 30 years old, somewhere around there. But so it's been a few years. It's been about close to almost 20 years and everything. And I remember because I was an alcoholic, I used to go and he was my drinking buddy, right? You know what I'm saying? He was my drinking buddy, one of my best friends. And I remember the night before it happened, we were sitting out. We was at a old abandoned drive-in theater. There was nobody out there. It was pitch black. We sitting out on the car, we drinking and carrying on, and we're laughing. He stops and he looks down at the ground. He goes and he looks at me. He goes, "Man, I am so glad that you were my friend." So I didn't notice the word that he was saying. The word, my friend, right? And he goes, "I'm so happy that I had the chance to meet you." Again, I'm not noticing the wording, right? And so I told him, I said, "Man, we're gonna be around forever, man. We're gonna grow old. You know what I'm saying? We're gonna have our kids and we're gonna be out on the porch swinging, and you know what I'm saying, and our kids are gonna grow up together and all of these different things." He was like, "Yeah, man." He goes, "Man, I can definitely understand it." But I noticed the tone in his voice, but again, never paid attention to it. And the next day I got the news that he had done it. So he was pretty much telling me his goodbyes. And I was so naive and blind to the words that I didn't pay attention to them. And I think sometimes, and I did blame myself for a while. I think sometimes we do that as people. We blame ourselves, and we don't know how to bounce back from that. How do we navigate something like that?
That's something my family and I have been dealing with firsthand, and I'm so sorry that you lost your friend that way. It is really a really hard thing. Um, the sorry, I'm gonna gather my thoughts.
Oh no, you're fine.
My
I know
son,
this can be a difficult conversation too. So yeah,
yeah, and grief brain is real. It's really real.
it is.
um,
Yes, it is.
my son left us on September 17th of 2023. Um, and that the weekend after that, I don't remember what day that was going to be. I was supposed to take my boards um, for to be a nurse practitioner and be like fully licensed and all that good stuff. And he and I were going to go mom son date after I finished my test. I had a lot to talk to him about. Like I said, I was a little concerned about him because I know he had started drinking again, and um, I was going to talk to him about things that I was concerned about. And ever since he left, I have really struggled with kind of beating myself up about not talking to him before, about waiting because I thought I had time. Like I had no idea that this was even a possibility for him. And so there's a lot of guilt and shame surrounding feeling like I didn't do enough, or I didn't do it soon enough, or I should have said something and not waited. We should have had a phone call. So many shoulda, coulda, wouldas. Um, and at the end of the day, I am left with knowing that my son got drunk, he was intoxicated, got in a fight with his girlfriend, got into a jeep, and took his own life. And it took me a little while to realize that there wasn't anything I could have done about that. Um, it was he was being compulsive, he was intoxicated, and he made a horrible decision that affected us all forever. But learning that living in those shoulda, coulda, wouldas makes me feel awful and horrible and worse. Um, and I also know that Daniel would not want me to be in that space.
Yeah.
And so,
Here's no, please
yeah,
finish.
I work really hard at making sure that I don't make those in my head, those mistakes, waiting. I don't do that now. If I've got something to say to my daughter or my husband or my mom or whoever, I say it because I want to make sure that I learn from that mistake and try really hard to just move forward, because staying back there, staying in that shame and that guilt, it doesn't do anything for any of us.
Yeah. Now, there's a question, and I think this question can go either which way, and things like that. And I'm going to pop it up here, and then I'm going to speak. I'm going to give my thoughts on it. I don't think she's saying that. Are you saying a sign of drinking is a cause for suicidal behavior? No.
No,
But
I um the thing I don't love about drinking um is that any thought that we have, um whether we're happy or sad or mad or suicidal or whatever, is intensified when we're intoxicated.
yes,
Inhibitions are lowered. Um, Addicts do have a higher tendency to take their own lives. So any type of addiction, I would be have a heightened sense of awareness. Um, but just drinking in general, I don't think that that's like a sign that someone is gonna take their own life.
right. I'm a add to that because this can be a very this convers that statement can take you in different places, right? Um, I used to be an alcoholic. I was an alcoholic for over 20 years. I used alcohol as a way to escape the reality that I was in. And I think most people who are addicted to drugs or alcohol and things like that, they tend to do it to numb themselves from either the thoughts of a past life, the thoughts of the reality that they're living in, or to numb themselves from an environment as well, right? Now, mix with an individual who is struggling mentally, that can add a person, especially if you're already in a depressive state, you can talk yourself into it. Now, I don't know if you heard me before, but I talked myself into it. I was drinking. I was like, I'm going to do it. I convinced myself that no one cared. Who's going to care about little old me, right? I don't have anyone. It's just me. And what it did, I blocked out all the people that did care for me because I became very selfish in my thoughts, right? I I literally convinced myself. I said, you know what? If I look at my life the way that it is, everyone that I know is gone, right? Mom, dad, friends, brother, son, everybody is gone. I'm homeless. I don't have too much. I'm already at my version of rock bottom. I could not see a way out of it. And I told myself, this would be the best thing for me. I have a younger sister. I hadn't talked to her in a while. I said, I don't want anyone to see me the way that I am because I don't want to be a burden or have them worry about me. And so if I did this in secret, it would make things better. But again, that's just what I said from my perspective or from my own experience of living through or having to go through that and was in that very dark place. Not saying that that's for everyone. I'm not saying that. But when a person is struggling with or yeah, when they're struggling with alcohol or any sort of drugs, a lot of times it's to escape something that's really, really hurting down inside of them, because a woman, I knew a woman, one of my really good friends a long time ago, she had been sexually assaulted so many a times, right? I mean, people and men used to beat up on her and things like that. And she became a prostitute. down the streets, making money, doing whatever she did. But she would, in turn, she knew that these things was going to happen to her. So she spent a lot of her money buying crack, right? And I asked her one day, and this is going to sound really bad. I asked her one day, why don't you why don't you come over here and do something different? She goes, sometimes I think about doing that, but I don't know how to get away. They're just going to find me. And no matter where I go, this is just going to keep happening. So if I numb myself to what's already going to happen, when they get done, it's no big thing. I'll just get up and go out and do what I need to do. Right. And I just looked at her and I had something in my heart just said, she's not going to make it. She's already accepted the fact of this is her life. And I knew what she was going to do. I did. And I didn't know how to stop it. How do we, as human beings, do better in supporting our friends, families?
Yeah, I think we need to listen. There's a lot of times when people do try to talk to friends or loved ones, and their friends or loved ones don't want to believe that that would happen, and so they're like, "Oh no, you're fine. You have so much to live for," and they don't listen. Um, and then one of the things that I know happens in the medical field and in the mental health field is sometimes people seek out help and we lock them away in a psych hospital for 3 days and pump them full of medications, which I don't think really helps. And I think oftentimes we worsen the situation by doing that to them. Um, and I think what we need to do is sit with people and one, tell them, like I am an existentialist and I think that people are going to do what people are going to do. And my job is to let them know that I love them and I care about them deeply and I wish they would stay. And if you want to leave, I get it. I understand. I've been there. But tell me bye. Like, tell me goodbye and let me give me a chance to tell you how much you mean to me so that we can have that connection. And I think opening that door for people, as scary as that sounds, um, lets them know that you really, really care and that you really understand what they're going through, and that they will want to stay. I hope.
Yeah,
Sometimes they're not going to, but like I said, um, people are gonna make their own choices, and we can only do our best and listen with a whole heart and be there for them when they need us.
nice. Now, you mentioned that you had a daughter too.
Yes.
How do you support your other children after experiencing something like that?
That is such a hard space to be in. And I love when people ask this question, and I hope that I do it right. Um, I try really hard, and I both try really hard to make sure that whatever grief we're going through um, does not overshadow our daughter, Caitlin. We try really hard to make sure that she is loved, um, that we are here for her, and we try to be happy with her in her happy moments. Um, and we all know that certain things are very bittersweet, like her birthday, for example, is hard. It's happy, but it's hard. She's going to continue to grow and change, and Daniel will never, we will never get to experience that with him. And, um, but we try really hard to be with her and be there for her, and make sure that she doesn't feel forgotten in all of this.
Right. I love that. I love that. And my friend Tracy says, listen to them. Don't be dismissive of the answer, and don't be judgmental. I think those are some really good tools, and and listening to you, those are some really good tools. So anybody out there that have a friend that have gone through it, maybe you yourself have gone through it, and maybe don't have those tools. There's some gems that's just been dropped in here. Please take those, right, and use them, and stand outside of the box, and don't try to force the conversations. But as Jen said, and as Tracy recommended, open the doors to have those conversations, right? And one thing that I've learned, just through experience as I've been growing within this field, is understanding when a person is ready to talk and understanding when they're not ready to talk, and not to have the expectation of saying, look, I want to talk right now and you're going to do it, right? You know what I'm saying? Because that's not going to get us anywhere. Because I wouldn't want nobody to do that to me, right? Because if you do it to me, I'll shut down, and you'll never have to worry about me saying nothing about it. As a matter of fact, I think my thought pattern would change to, you know what? I don't care how you feel about what I'm about ready to do, and since I don't care about that, then it doesn't matter what I do in that matter. Now, these again are just thoughts from a person who has walked this path before, right? And so these are just things that I've thought about, um, that got me into my dark place, and some of the things that I thought about as I was climbing myself out of that dark place as well, to find this new version of myself, and to get out of the mindset of why is life doing this to me, and begin to ask, what is it trying to give me, right? And if I would have ever known that this is where it was going to send me, I probably would have started the process a long time ago. Like, all right, let's do this. But I appreciate the experience. I really do. Now, what are some some of the things that you can give people out there right now, to help them as they journey through their own set of grief, to dealing with such a such a tragic situation?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to start with one of the comments that you put up there earlier. Um, I believe it was a mom that said that she's only 7 years into her grief. I just want to say I appreciate that. She said only or just. I can't remember which.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
want to.
I'll pop back up
Um,
here so you can see it.
I think it's really important for people. It's really important for everybody to understand that this is a lifelong process. Um, and it doesn't mean you can't be happy, and it doesn't mean sometimes you can't be sad. I have learned to embrace the idea of both and instead of either or. Like um, you can grieve and learn to be happy again. You don't have to just grieve and never see joy again. And so I think learning to embrace both sides of this path is really helpful. It has been for me. Um, I like to recommend that people find ways to spend time with grief. I like to call her my very needy friend, and if I don't pay attention to her, then boy does she come after me later, and
Oh,
I pay for it. That's when I'm, on the bathroom floor or on the kitchen floor, um, sobbing. Not that that doesn't still happen sometimes, but like I said, if I give her the attention that she needs a little bit every day, um, then she doesn't come, clawing at my door later. Um, I love creativity. Any way you can. I am a terrible artist, but I love to paint um, and to just be in a creative space. And so I always recommend that people find some way to be creative, whether it's writing, painting, singing, um, whatever. Um, And then for me also, I had to find an outlet, and I found that helping people through their grief makes me feel better, and it helps me have a space for my grief. And so I started the process of writing a book. And then I also created a YouTube channel called The Ashes We Keep. And I share my story, and I talk a lot about um, different things that helped me. And I talk about the stages of grief. I hate that word stage. I call them the states of grief, because stage makes it sound like, a graduation process, and then you're going to reach the end one day, but that's not how it works. Um, and so I like to share. I feel like that's really helpful.
I love that, and I love the fact that you said what you said. Grief is very needy, right? I was during the conference last night. I think we was doing our last show, and I said something similar to that. I said, look, one thing about grief that you got to understand: grief is very selfish, right? You know what I'm saying? Grief wants you to itself. It does. That means when it shows up, it wants you to pay attention to it. It wants your whole world to revolve around what it needs right now. It's selfish. It wants your attention, right? You know what I'm saying? And I was like, and that's where a lot of people don't understand. When it comes, give it what it needs. And what we may find, and I don't know if this is for everyone, and if it's not, that's okay, But these are just again things that I've learned throughout my process is that when my grief shows up and I give it the attention that it needs, I realize that it's teaching me certain things. It's helping me heal parts of myself that still needs that attention, that still needs to heal. And so I learned to pay attention to it, learn to just sit with it and respect it for the most part. And then most importantly, people that a lot of people that know me, when I tell them that grief is my first love, it's because it is, right? I love everything about it. And so when it comes, I'm like a child in the rain that's dancing in the puddles, right? I love sitting with it, and I love what it gives me. I love the memories that it brings up, right? Because not everything is bad. Not everything is bad, but it brings up those memories, and it helps me go to a place where I can say, man, that was fun. And the sadness is no longer there. The pain is there, but it's very faint, right? And so, I'm right there with you. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people out there who probably feel the same way, and maybe not. Everybody's going to experience it on their own different levels, and that's perfectly fine. This is yours. You get to mold this to what you need it for, and to begin whatever you need to do to heal, to get yourself in a good place. I always recommend people doing that. Like you said, creativity, that's a huge part of it. Um, Finding things like music or remembering what you used to do with your loved one, maybe bowling, maybe fishing, maybe, whatever those things are, right? I always recommend people do those things. Now, okay, as we begin to wrap this up, right? First I want to say, man, thank you for having such a deep, meaningful conversation around this topic, right? And to be able to educate the people through your experience and your knowledge and everything. And can't wait to hear from your husband. I would love to know more about that and how I can assist in those areas. So my first question would be, how can people find you, Trace or Jen?
Yeah, so I will always accept like friend requests and stuff on Facebook, and follows on Instagram. I will follow you back. Um, it's a little hard for me to find because there's like a trillion Jennifer Allen in the world. My YouTube channel is The Ashes We Keep. And then our mental health practice is Front Range Family Resource Center. and it's located in Wheat Ridge, Colorado. And I'm happy to reply to emails or whatever. If anybody has any other questions, I'm always happy. It's a weird thing to love to talk about, probably to some, but I love talking about my son. I love talking about grief, and I love sharing this with the world. So I'm always happy to help or answer questions.
Most definitely. And that's crazy. We'll talk after the show because I didn't know. I don't think I asked you where you was from the first time, right? But
Well,
I realized we're
yeah,
neighbors.
we're in Florida. My husband and I. We lost our son in Colorado, and I had to go. I had to get out of Dodge. There were just too many memories, and it was really hard to heal. Um, but our business is still there, so I'm actually there all the time. I'll be there in May, and then we'll be back in July. So we're there.
Okay, well, when you come back out here, we're definitely going to have to connect. I'm only in Fort Collins.
Nice.
Yeah, well, so when you come back, let me know. We'd definitely love to connect and come down and meet you, and just hang out and talk, and get the chance
That'll
to
be
know
great.
more about your work. So my second question would be, if you had a superpower, what would it be?
Oh, you know, this is my favorite question. I wish I could either have like a universal translator in my head or could speak every language. I think being able to communicate with anyone, anywhere would be like the best gift. I can't imagine a power than that.
I love that. Just FYI, so Tracy is a huge name in the suicide bereavement support industry, and she's out there changing the dynamic of it as well. She just sent you a friend request on LinkedIn.
Nice.
If you get a chance to connect with her, she has a lot of amazing things coming up as well. And I'm pretty sure if y'all connect, she's going to let you know. But yeah, she's a wonderful person and wonderful person. She writes programs and help educate people on this very exact thing. And I think you guys would be a powerhouse if you got together and collaborated and
That
things
would
like
be
that.
awesome.
Yeah. So please, to connect with her, you guys. I would love to see you guys connect. So now my last thing, if you can leave the audience with something, what would you leave them with?
Uh, be kind to yourself. Um, in all of this, one of the things we like to do the most, I think, is beat ourselves up. With those shoulda, coulda, wouldas, that guilt and that shame. Um, it seems like no matter how our loved ones leave us, we're left with a lot of that. And so I just would like everybody to try to find space in their hearts to find kindness for themselves. Um, the same kindness that they would show to that loved one.
I love that. I love that. And as we begin to wrap this up, I want to say again, Jen, thank you for this opportunity to have this conversation. For everyone else who have been tuning in and things like that, I know we have deep conversations on the show, and it doesn't stop. It really doesn't stop because that's what we need. We need more meaningful, deep conversations around us from people. Like I said in the beginning, I'll say it again. People out here changing people's heartbeats, hearts one heartbeat at a time, and surround yourself with people who care, right? That get it, that genuinely want to um, see you heal and be happy. With that being said, Jan, again, thank you for being here. Tracy, thank you for tuning in. Everyone, thank you for tuning in and being a part of this conversation. And with that being said, guys, we're going to wrap this one up. We're going to see you guys in the next one. I love you and have an amazing day.
Thank
Peace.
you.